Hey everyone, it's Josh with Zoo Studios here, and today we're going to finish what we started in a previous video, which is do a complete walkthrough of the Zoo Tiles Hime rulebook. And so for those who haven't watched the previous video, we went through roughly the first 10 pages of the rulebook, and with this video we're going to finish it up and finish up the last 10. But before we get started, this is where we left off, but before we go further, I just want to take a quick second to go back and just briefly go over the things that we talked about last time. So we got the little cover of the rule book here. We've got a little introduction piece. We've got anatomy of a zoo tile that talks about different parts of a tile. We talk about number of players, 2 players, and we talk about the tiles in the box that you get, the playing area, basically a table or a flat surface. And in order to win, the first player to score 12 points wins the game. Or if someone needs to draw a tile but they can't do so because they ran out of tiles, then they lose. We also talked about the setup. Setup's pretty straightforward. You take one of the 40 tile decks, you each randomize those, and then you make 5 draw stacks in front of you, each with 8 tiles in it. Then you draw 5 tiles from those stacks, and you should be ready to go. The playing area should look something similar to this, where a player's here and a player's here. You've got the 5 stacks in front of them, and you've got a little area for your point pile and a little area for your discard pile. And then you're all ready to play. Then we talked about the different tile types. There's 4 tile types in Zoo Tiles. There's the creatures, which are primary importance. They're the things that get played and moved around and captured, and lots of fun happen with the creatures. Then there are tiles called action or reaction tiles, and they look like these here. They've got action tiles, reaction tiles with a little R. The action has the A, and then tiles that can be used as either action or reaction tiles. So we talked about those. Then there's also items and obstacles, and we talked about those. Additionally, we went into the game turn and how that works. So basically there's 5 things here that you can do, and you can do one of those things. You can do multiple of those things. Well, you can't do multiple of the same thing, but you can do multiple of these actions. You can do all of them, you can do some of them, you can do none of them. These are the 5 things that a player can do on their turn. And at the end of a player's turn, they must draw 1 tile from one of their stacks. But if they don't do any of these actions during their turn, they have the option of drawing an additional tile. So that's how a game turn works. Very simple. Spaces, I didn't go over spaces last time, but I will this time. And then we talked about the overview of play. So in order to start a game of Zoo Tiles, you take a tile that has a strength or intelligence value, and you place that in the center of the playing area, and that starts a game. And then every subsequent tile that's placed in the playing area needs to be placed in what's called a neighboring position to a tile that's in the playing area. And we go over what's a neighbor and what's not a neighbor here. And then we finished up by talking about completing a square of just completing a square of tiles, a little 2x2 square. And we talked about compatible squares. So what happens if you complete a square and all the creatures in the square are compatible with their neighbor. So we talked about compatibility, and we talked about making a compatible square. So we talked about a lot of stuff in the last video. So if you haven't watched that one, you might want to go check it out. We also talked about briefly talked about the 2 ways to score points. The first one is to form a square where all the creatures are compatible with their neighbor. And then the other one is to do a battle, to win a battle and capture a creature. And we did not talk about battling last time, but we will talk about battling going forward. And so that's where we left off. And then let's just keep on going from here. So talked about compatible creatures. And now we're on to action stacks. Now, in the previous video, we did talk about action stacks, but I'm going to talk about them again because they are that important. And what I'm going to do to kind of help illustrate an action stack in progress or in action is I have a little setup here. It's kind of like a little fake game that is going on, and I can use this to describe an action stack in practice, basically. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So once again, I'll just say there's 3 types of action tiles. there's actions, there's reactions, and there's action and reactions. So let's talk about it actually working in the game. So let's say we have this set up and it's my turn. So I'm playing this opponent, this is the opponent's hand, and it's my turn, this is my hand. And so of the 5 things that I could do, the choices that I have, one of them is to place a tile with a strength or intelligence into the playing area, and it must be placed in a neighboring position to a tile that's already in play. So let's say I'm going to take this pig, and I'm going to put that pig right there. And for some reason I don't like this dog here, so I am going to try and do an action, and I'm going to do this action here. It's called Omnivorous. And basically what it allows me to do is to discard a tile neighboring a pig I control. This is an incredibly powerful tile, by the way. So this is my hand, that's my opponent's hand, and I already placed my tile for the turn. So I'm additionally going to start an action stack. And I do that by taking an action tile, and it has to be an action tile. It can't be a reaction tile. It could be an action or a reaction tile because this can be either one. But either an action or an action reaction tile, and I'm going to place it off to the side so it doesn't go in the playing area, it goes off to the side, and I would tell my opponent, I'm going to do this action here. And so that's all you have to tell your opponent. You don't have to tell your opponent any deeper strategy than that. All you have to say is that, hey, you know what, I want to do this, this action, and just leave it at that. And then it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that, hey, the pig's here, he wants to discard a tile neighboring the pig, and so it's looking like its dog is going to be the one that gets taken out. So since I played the action, my opponent now has the opportunity to react to that. And here are my opponent's tiles, and it just so happens that they have this one. It's an action or reaction, and it's called Loud Bark. And Loud Bark is choose a creature neighboring a dog you control. Have its controller move the creature 1 space into an empty one. Capture the creature if its controller cannot do this. So what my opponent is thinking is that, hey, before my dog gets eaten, I'm going to play this Loud Bark. And what I can do is I can Loud Bark the rabbit. Since the rabbit has nowhere to go, then my dog could capture the rabbit before it gets eaten by the pig. So my opponent would place this Loud Bark here and then give me the opportunity to react to their reaction. And so I'm looking at that and I'm kind of understanding what they want to do. So I could react to that by placing another action reaction, but this time I'm going to use it as a reaction tile, and I'm going to place this right on top. And so what this does is it's choose a rabbit you control. That rabbit may leap in a straight line over 1, 2, or 3 tiles or spaces into an empty space. So I'm going to play that right here, and then I'm going to say, opponent, back to you. And then the opponent, if they wanted to, they could place another reaction, and but they don't have one. Well, they actually have one, but this only works during a battle, so this wouldn't be something that they could use as a reaction to what's happening to this stack right now. So they would pass, and I would pass, and then the first thing I would do is take the very top tile and do what it says. So choose a rabbit you control. That rabbit may leap in a straight line over 1, 2, or 3 tiles or spaces into an empty space. So what my rabbit's going to do is it is going to get away from that dog, and it is going to hop over the horse here. And one thing I didn't mention when we talked about action and reaction tiles in the previous video is that once an action or reaction is done, it gets discarded. So that's something that should be pointed out. So once this is done, once that's resolved, this would get discarded. Then it's my opponent's turn. My opponent would take a look at their tile and do what it says. So their grand plans of capturing this rabbit that was boxed in kind of got disturbed a little bit because the rabbit hopped out of the way. But let's see if this can help them in any way. So it says choose a creature neighboring a dog you control. Have its controller move the creature 1 space into an empty one. Capture the creature if its controller cannot do this. So now that the rabbit's not here, the dog can't choose the rabbit, but the pig is actually neighboring the dog now. So he could change the strategy and go, you know what, since the rabbit's not here, I'm going to do the pig. And so he would basically say, okay, Josh, you have to move that pig into an empty space or I will capture it. And so I could choose to move it here. I could choose to move it here. I could choose to move it here. But let's just say I choose to move it here. And then this would get discarded because it was just used. And then finally, we get to the action that was attempting to be accomplished in the first place. Discard a tile neighboring a pig you control. Well, here's a pig, but there are no tiles neighboring the pig anymore. So my attempt to basically eat the dog didn't work because the dog barked and I ran away from the dog, and then when I turned and bit, there's nothing there. So this actually gets discarded. It fizzes out because it cannot happen. So that right there is a really good practical description of how an action stack works. You always start with an action tile, and then reaction tiles are always placed on top. You can't play a reaction tile unless it's a reaction to an action that was played. So that is how an action stack works. Okay, and then we'll move over here to battle action stacks. And so now we're going to start to talk about battling a little bit, and I'm going to adjust this. So let's look at this. So the way battle works is I will just explain kind of how it would work if these two tiles were battling. If my opponent was playing pigs, let's say, and I was playing rabbits, and we just had these tiles. So let's say I went first and I placed a rabbit into the playing area, and then it was my opponent's turn, and my opponent placed a pig. Now my opponent, to kind of go back to what we talked about in the previous video, after the first tile is played, every subsequent tile must be placed in an orthogonal position or side by side to a tile that's currently in place. So he could put this tile pig here. You know what? Let's just put it here for just to say, put it there. So rabbit's here, and then my opponent plays the pig. Now we'll say that my opponent wants the pig to attack the rabbit. And the way that works is, let's say that this is my opponent's hand. They could take any tile in their hand. It could be anything. So it could even be this reaction tile, or it could be one of these creatures, or it could be an item, anything, any tile, and they would set it off to the side, very much like I set that previous action tile off to the side. And what this stands for is this is a battle action tile. It's basically the tile that starts a battle action stack. And a battle action stack works exactly the same as the action stack that we just went through. So my opponent would start that, and then let's say I would have an opportunity to react to that if I wanted to. But let's just say I don't have tiles to react to that. Let's just, let's say that these are my tiles, and I don't have anything that would help me as a reaction. Let's say I just have 3 creature tiles and an action. So my action can't respond to an action, so I would just pass my turn. And then, but if I did have a reaction tile, I could place that on top, and then my opponent would have the opportunity to place a reaction on top of my reaction, and we would go back and forth exactly the same as we did before, and we could just stack this up as high as we wanted to, assuming that we had reaction tiles to keep adding to it. But let's say we didn't add any reaction tiles to it. The pig came in, said, I want to battle your rabbit, and this is the tile I want to use to start that battle. Well, how a battle resolves, since we got to this action, is it's a very simple comparison between strength and intelligence. So what you'll notice here with this rabbit is that the rabbit has a 1 strength and a 3 intelligence. And what you'll notice here from this pig is that the pig has a 3 strength and 4 intelligence. So the pig is both stronger and smarter than the rabbit. So what would happen is once the action once the battle action tile is reached, you would do that comparison. And if one tile, it has greater strength and greater intelligence. So that's kind of a key thing. They both have to be greater. Then they would win the battle and they would capture the other tile. So in this case here, since the pig is both stronger and smarter, he would capture the rabbit, would remove the rabbit from the playing area and put that rabbit in their point pile, and they would score 1 point for that. So that is that's a very simple battle scenario. Let's do something a little bit more complicated. Let's say that, you know, they have these tiles here, and let's say that this was the situation. Let's go ahead and put this pig here this time, and let's say that this was the situation. Let's say that I'm playing rabbits and rams, and it just so happens that I have a ram next to my rabbit, and the pig comes in and says it wants to attack my rabbit. Now, what I can do, since I have a tile that's neighboring the defender, and this is super key here, okay? All battling happens around the defender, okay? So if there is a tile, like let's say over here, this dog, it can't be involved in this battle because it is not close to the defending rabbit. So the pig comes in, wants to attack the rabbit, but the rabbit has a friend that's a neighbor, the ram. And so the rabbit can call on the ram and say, hey, help me out against this crazy pig that's coming in. So before the pig would come in though, my opponent would choose any tile and say, you know what, here comes my pig. I want to come in and attack the rabbit. But my rabbit gets help from the ram, and it's very simple. All you do is combine the stats. And so the ram basically loans the rabbit its strength and intelligence. So now, instead of the rabbit being a 1-3, the rabbit can add the ram strength and intelligence, which is 4 and 2. So now the rabbit becomes a 5-5 entity, basically, and would defeat the pig, which is a 3-4 entity. So it would be kind of silly for a pig to kind of go into a situation like this, but if the pig did, then the rabbit would win, and the rabbit would capture the pig and put it in its point pile. So that's how this is called allies. And this is, we actually turned the page here. So we talked about the battle action stack, and we basically already went over how to battle, and now we're here on this part talking about allies. So the ram is an ally to the rabbit when the pig comes in, and these two together beat the pig, and the pig is captured and put into a point pile. Now, let's say that this was the situation, and the pig wants to come in, and again, here's my opponent's tiles. So let's say they pick this one this time, and they put this down, and they go, my pig is coming in to attack your rabbit, and my ram is going to be its ally. Now, why can the ram be an ally? The reason the ram can be the ally is because it is neighboring the defending tile. That's why. And so what would happen is that these two would combine their stats, and this would become a 7-6 entity versus this 1-3 entity, and it would obviously be overkill and capture the rabbit, and the rabbit would be put into the point pile, and it would be 1 point. And so that is how this works. One thing I have seen people do in the past is kind of confuse this a little bit and say, what if the ram is attacking the rabbit? Can the dog help the ram because the dog is right next to the ram? No, it cannot do that because it needs to be neighboring. The rabbit is the defender. So the dog would need to be here or here in order to participate. Even though it's neighbor to the ram, it's not neighbor to the defender. And so that's a key point. The battles always happen around the defender. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. Let's see what else we got here. Let's see. And then, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it for battling and how that works and action reaction. On page 16 and 17, these are really the last 2 pages of the rules. I'll just go over some of these miscellaneous rules real fast. This first one here is tiles placed on or under another tile become attached to that tile. So here is a tile. It is called cage. And what I can do with this cage is I can put it on a creature. So let's say that on my turn, since this isn't an action or a reaction, this is This is an item. It has a strength and intelligence, so instead of putting a creature into play, I could choose to put a cage in play. And the way cage works is I would put this right on top of a animal and I would put it in a cage. And so what this rule is saying is once something is either on or under a tile, if this tile moves, it's attached to the other tile and that tile would move as well. So like for instance, if I had a horse here, let's see, let me grab a horse. If I had a horse here and the horse did this tile, it's called powerful kick, and I did that as an action. There was no reactions to it, and I decided I wanted to kick this cage. I would kick both tiles. I'm kicking the cage, and the attached tile is going with it. So that's what this is. This is what this little rule here is. If a tile is underneath or on top, they are attached to each other. And this other rule here, icons and words that describe icons are interchangeable. So let me see if I could find one of those real fast. Let's see here. I thought, oh, there it is. Okay. Here we go. Perfect. Okay, so I talked about this tile in the last video, but what you'll see here is a little icon at the very bottom there. You see that's the icon for an obstacle. So a lot, and throughout all these tiles, I try to save space and condense space. So I use icons instead of words, and all this rule is that these are interchangeable. So an icon for an obstacle is exactly the same as saying the word obstacle, and vice versa. A word obstacle is just like that. So if you see that, that's just as good as the word obstacle. And then the next one is the battle doesn't always have a winner. And so what does that mean? Well, just because somebody attempts a battle doesn't necessarily mean they're going to win or lose the battle. Let's take these two for example. So we got a ram here with a 4 strength and a 2 intelligence, and we have a bunny here, a rabbit with 1 strength and 3 intelligence. And let's say the rabbit is feeling a little feisty and it wants to fight the ram. So the rabbit isn't strong enough, but it is smarter. But since it's not both stronger and smarter, then the result is a draw. Likewise, and so nobody wins that battle. Really, the end result is that I would end up burning a tile to start this battle, and then this tile would get discarded, and it would be kind of a waste. But this is an instance where you would not have a winner of this battle. Additionally, if there's a tile that allows, like for instance, this one here, if a battle starts, let's say I started a battle, and then I did rabbit leap and I moved over here, and then we go here to the actual battle. So the battle takes place now, and there is no attacker next to a defender, then that just kind of fizzles and this gets discarded as well. So those are 2 instances where just because a battle happens, there isn't always a winner. They can easily just bounce off each other and move around, so that's fine. Allies. We talked about allies a little bit just now. So we had the situation where, let's say we had this situation here where the ram was going to be an ally to the rabbit. If there's some action or reaction that causes the ram, let's say, to move over here, and the ram is no longer neighbors to the defending tile, then it can no longer be an ally. So even though, like, maybe when this starts and it's like, oh, I want to battle, or my pig wants to come in and battle the rabbit, and I go, okay, well, my ram's going to help. If somebody puts some reaction on there that somehow moves the ram, then the ally is gone, and that allyship is broken because it's no longer neighboring the rabbit, and the rabbit's in big trouble, and it'll probably get captured, and the other guy would get a point. So that's about allies. If they move out of the capacity to be an ally, then they no longer can be an ally. There's another one up here. Players may only replace tiles they control. So what does that mean? That means, let's see here. There are some tiles that require you to replace other tiles. So here's a perfect example. This is a happy tiger, and you can see the first little sentence there, must replace a tiger. Now, let's say this was the situation here where I'm playing a tiger deck and my opponent is playing a tiger deck. I couldn't take this happy tiger and replace their tiger. That would not work. On things that have to be replaced, you can only replace things you control. So I could replace this tiger because I control that tiger, and this would actually get discarded. So once a tile is replaced, it gets discarded. But again, I could not do a tile that I did not control. So that's what this is. Players may only replace tiles they control. And you know what? I'm going to take a quick second. Someone brought this up. It's a little thing about this tile here, wooden horse. And you'll see what it says, wooden horse. As an action, you may replace one wooden horse with a horse. So let's just say this wooden horse is out here. This has to be replaced by a tile that's in your hand. And so on the next version of this, it's going to say with a horse from your hand. So for instance, if this was the situation where I have the wooden horse here, but my opponent has a horse here, I couldn't decide to replace the wooden horse with my opponent's horse. That wouldn't work. Likewise, I couldn't, even if I controlled the horse, I couldn't replace this with a horse in play. This has to be a horse from your hand. So just kind of pointing that out there. That's a little errata around a wooden horse. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, strength of 0. So if a creature ever has a strength that reaches 0, then it is immediately discarded. So let me find a rabbit here. Here's a good example. So here's a rabbit, and sure, let's go ahead and put this ram or this pig here, and let's see. Perfect, exactly what I'm looking for. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's say that I have this pig and I have this rabbit, and my opponent has this pig here. And let's just say I've got these tiles in my hand, and I say my pig is going to attack your pig with help from this rabbit. And I take my trusty tile, I put that down to start the battle. And I pass it to my opponent, and I say, is there anything you want to do? And my opponent says, yes, there is something I'd like to do. I would like to play this. And what this tile is lightning. Choose a tile to have -2 strength for the rest of the turn. So my opponent plays this, and say I don't have any reaction to that. We do what this says, and it says, choose a tile to have -2 strength for the rest of the turn. And the pig chooses the rabbit. Well, the rabbit, as I won 3, is now a -1, 3. And so since it dropped to 0, it would immediately be discarded. And this would be discarded. Then the battle would happen, but these two pigs would bounce because they're exactly the same. Neither of them have greater strength or intelligence than the other. So that's an example of a creature getting minus strength and then it needing to be discarded. So that is what that's what this talks about. And then last but not least, actually it's not last because there's something I do want to go over before the very end, are these tiles. So you actually see these as soon as you pop open the box, and you might be wondering, what are they? All these are placeholder tiles for effects that tiles in the playing area create. So what exactly does that mean? Let me find... Oh, let's see, where is... here we go. Perfect example of how this works. Let's see, okay, here we go. Let's do this. Again, back with the pig and the rabbit. So, let's say this is the situation here. I have this obstacle out called a rabbit hole. And I have a rabbit and I have a pig. And the pig comes at the rabbit and wants to battle. So he puts the tile down. He says, my pig, I want to attack the rabbit. And so what this tile allows me to do is, let's read it real fast. What this tile allows me to do is, as a reaction, you may place a rabbit you control under this tile. As an action, you may take a rabbit from under this tile and place it into any empty space. if this tile is discarded from the playing area, discard all rabbits in the hole. So let's just take that first part. As a reaction, you may place a rabbit you control under this tile. So let's just say this is here. And the pig comes in, starts the battle with the battle action tile. But I don't have a reaction that allows me to do this. Like there's not a tile in my hand. So what I would do is I would grab these placeholder tiles and I would take this R and I would put that on top of the battle action tile to represent the effect that's happening here. And then what would happen is once we got to this tile, I would take this, kind of put it off to the side, and then I would do this effect. And this effect says, as a reaction, you may place a rabbit you control, which would be this rabbit, under this tile. So the rabbit would jump in the hole, and then the battle would happen, but there's no more rabbit, so this would fizzle, and the pig does not get the rabbit. So that is an example of how these can be used. If a tile in the playing area can create an action or a reaction, when you want to do that on the stack, you use these tiles as a placeholder. And so that's pretty much it for the rulebook, actually. So between the previous video and this video, you're pretty well set. There's one last thing that I want to talk about, though, and it may be the most complicated thing of the game. I don't think so. But it's called spaces, the concept of spaces. And I didn't, it was in a page in the previous video, but I kind of skipped over that. But I'll go over that right now. So basically the way spaces work spaces are created when tiles are placed in the playing area. So before any tiles are placed in the playing area, there are no spaces. But as soon as a tile is placed in the playing area, spaces are immediately created around, neighboring spaces are immediately created. So how many spaces are in the playing area now? 0. How many spaces are in the playing area now? 4. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. And now the reason why that's important is because there are certain tiles, like this tile here, Rabbit Leap, that allow movement over spaces and not tiles. So for instance, Rabbit Leap, we already talked about this one, but it's choose a rabbit you control. That rabbit may leap in a straight line over 1, 2, or 3 tiles or spaces into an empty space. So where are the spaces here? There's a space here, 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 here. And let's say the rabbit uses Rabbit Leap and hops over the pig. Well, once the rabbit is here, spaces are created. And then once the rabbit is here in the air, there's spaces that are created here, here, and here. So the rabbit, even though there aren't spaces over here now, the rabbit in its leap basically creates them as it moves, right? So it would be like 1, 2, 3, and it could actually leap over 3, but let's just say it does 2, so it lands here. It can land there because it created the spaces as it was moving. So now how many spaces? Where are the spaces? So there's a space here, 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 and here. So basically the point is when a creature moves, it moves and creates a space. There's a, let me see if I can find a pig tile waddle, which will also help kind of talk about that. So here's a pig tile, it's called waddle. And it says you may move a pig you control over 1 space into an empty space. So what does that mean? If there wasn't a space here, the pig wouldn't be able to move into the space. So let's say I play this. So the reason why the pig can move into a space is because there's a space there for it to move into. There's a space here. There is not a space here. But once the pig moves into the space, new empty spaces are created. So I hope that makes sense. When a creature is moving, it creates spaces as it moves. So it'll create the next space that it wants to move into. So you don't have to worry about it not having a space to move, even though, like for instance, in this instance here, right, there isn't a space over here. So if a rabbit were to leap into this space, well, there's not a space there. That's the reason why the rabbit creates spaces as it goes. So rabbit goes here, then it goes here, and while it's still up in the air here, it creates this space, and then it can land in space. So that is how spaces work. And again, if you have any questions or anything like that, please feel free to leave them in the comments. But I think that this video and the previous video taken together basically goes through the entire rule book. And if there's anything I've left out, I can always make another video. But I think for the most part, that's it. And I want to thank everybody for taking the time to look into zoo tiles, and hopefully you get a box, you get a game when it comes out, and hopefully you have lots of fun with it. So until next time, thank you so much, and I'll talk to you later.